Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The sun had barely kissed the horizon, painting the narrow streets of Cairo Bend in muted gold and dusty orange. Mira Abadi clutched her daughter Lila close, their shadows long on the cracked pavement. Myra's eyes darted nervously, her heart hammering. They weren't usually out this late, but the market had been desperate that day. She adjusted the worn leather strap of her basket, hoping no one would notice her fragile frame and tired expression. Then the laughter hit, sharp and cruel, echoing off the walls. 4 men emerged from the alleyway, faces hidden under hoodies, knives glinting in the weak sunlight. "Look at the widow playing with her little girl," one sneered, voice dripping with mockery. Myra's stomach lurched. Lila clutched her hand tightly, sensing the danger but too young to understand its full weight. Mira stepped in front of her daughter instinctively, body tense, mind racing for a way to escape. The tallest thug shoved Mira back, sending her basket tumbling, fruits rolling across the dusty street. "Move, old woman," he spat, laughter cutting through the morning stillness. Myra's jaw tightened. She had faced loss before, yes, but this fear was different, sharp, immediate, suffocating. She tried to block the nearest thug, but another swung a fist. Pain exploded across her ribs. Lila cried out, clutching her mother's sleeve, trembling. The world slowed. Mira felt the sting of helplessness gnawing at her, a cold hand wrapping around her chest. Her mind screamed, "Don't let them hurt her. Please, not my daughter." One of the thugs leaned in close, eyes cruel, teeth bared. "You'll pay for thinking the world cares about a widow," he whispered. Mira could smell his breath, tainted with cheap alcohol. She swallowed bile, trying to summon courage. And then, a sound. A low, guttural growl rolled across the street. The thugs froze, glancing around, knives wavering. Myra's heart skipped, a strange hope blooming. From the shadows near the old bakery, a massive black and tan dog emerged, fur bristling, teeth glinting like knives. Behind him, a man stepped forward, posture solid, chest rising and falling in controlled rhythm. A Navy SEAL. His eyes locked on the attackers, calm, precise, deadly. The dog lunged first, a blur of muscle and teeth. The nearest thug yelped, staggering back, knife slipping from his hand. The SEAL moved with the fluidity of a predator, taking cover behind a crumbling wall, scanning for the next threat. Myra's chest heaved, her hands trembling as she pulled Lila close. She could barely believe it. The arrival of this man and his companion had shifted the air itself. The danger had not disappeared, but suddenly, it seemed conquerable. One thug tried to recover, stepping toward Mira with a wild yell. The SEAL barked a command, sharp, final. The dog reacted instantly, colliding with the attacker, knocking him into the dirt. The other thugs faltered, eyes wide with disbelief. Myra's pulse raced faster than ever, terror and awe mingling in her chest. She whispered to Lila, "It's okay, he's here." But the chapter did not end. The thugs weren't defeated yet. They regrouped, muttering threats and glaring daggers at the Navy SEAL and his dog. Myra's body coiled with fear and adrenaline, knowing this battle had only just begun. Somewhere in the distance, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see who would move first. Mira Abadi sat on the creaking porch of her small brick home, the early morning breeze tugging at her thin shawl. The street below was quiet now, but her mind replayed the attack in a loop, each detail sharper than the last. She held Lila on her lap, brushing the girl's tangled curls with fingers that still trembled. How had life spiraled so violently? Just a year ago, Mira had believed she could survive anything, but then her husband, Darius, had been taken and everything had shifted. Cairo Bend wasn't forgiving. Neighbors whispered behind faded curtains, and the city's narrow alleys harbored more danger than safety. Mira remembered Darius' laughter, the way he used to lift Lila onto his shoulders, spinning her until she shrieked with joy. The warmth of those memories clashed violently with the cold ache in her chest now. Raising Lila alone had forced Mira into a daily battle against fear, poverty, and judgment. Every day was a delicate dance, groceries balanced, bills paid, and the looming threat of violence ever present. Her thoughts drifted further back, to the day Darius had taken her hand under the willow tree by the river. "We'll always protect each other," he had whispered, eyes serious but soft. Mira had smiled, naive to the cruel unpredictability of life. Losing him had not only stolen her heart but stripped away the sense of security she had once taken for granted. She had learned to smile through grief, to mask fear behind determination, but inside, the wound remained raw. Lila shifted on her lap, tugging gently at Myra's sleeve. "Mama, did the big dog save us?" The girl's voice was a fragile thread of hope. Myra's lips quivered. "Yes, baby. He did," she murmured, stroking Lila's cheek. Yet the memory of the attacker's sneers haunted her. They weren't ordinary thieves. Their eyes held malice, a deliberate cruelty designed to strip away dignity. Mira clenched her fists, feeling the bitter sting of helplessness. She had known fear before, but this had been humiliation, public and merciless. The flashback deepened. Mira remembered the first time she had felt truly vulnerable as a widow. Bills piled on the kitchen counter, eviction notices creeping into her mailbox, neighbors glancing away when she passed. Each setback whispered that the world expected her to crumble, to fail as a single mother. She had fought silently, hours spent scrubbing floors, delivering groceries and sewing clothing for Lila. Strength had become her armor, resilience her only companion. And yet she was human. She had nights where tears soaked her pillow and mornings when the weight of survival threatened to crush her. That evening before the attack, she had lingered near the market longer than usual, hoping to grab a few extra coins for Lila's school supplies. The warmth of the setting sun had lulled her into a false sense of safety. The streets, normally familiar, had felt ominously empty. And then the shadow had fallen, a collective of malice that seemed to know precisely how to exploit fear. Mira realized now that her life had been a series of tests, each one more brutal than the last, and she had survived, barely. Her gaze returned to the present. The image of the Navy SEAL and his massive K9 burned into her mind. There had been a moment, just a heartbeat, when she had felt completely powerless. And then, salvation. Mira didn't know who the man was or why he had appeared when he did. But the way he moved, the way the dog obeyed his silent commands, it was like witnessing a force of nature bending reality, giving her a glimpse of hope she hadn't dared feel in months. In that moment, she swore to herself that she would never allow fear to dictate her life again. If strangers could threaten her peace, she would find strength in allies, in courage, in every small victory. For Lila, for herself, she would not bow. Somewhere, deep in the shadows of Caro Bend, destiny had placed someone formidable, someone who could tip the scales. And Mira knew, even without understanding it fully, that the story of that day had only begun. The street was still humming with residual fear. Myra's lungs burned as she clutched Lila closer, trying to steady both of them. The attackers had retreated for now, their laughter fading into angry mutters, but the threat lingered like a storm cloud. And then, as if summoned by desperation itself, the man with the dog stepped fully into the sunlight. His presence was commanding, a living shield of precision and control. The Navy SEAL's eyes were sharp, scanning the alleyways, memorizing escape routes, noting potential threats. His K9, a massive black and tan shepherd named Titan, moved at his side, muscles coiled like springs, ears flicking at every sound. Mira could barely speak. Who are you?" she managed, voice trembling with relief and awe. The man's gaze softened for just a fraction. "Someone who doesn't let bullies win," he replied, low and calm. His words carried authority, yet there was a strange warmth beneath the steel. Lila's small hand reached for Titan, brushing the dog's fur. Titan growled softly, sensing her innocence, and Mira allowed herself the briefest flicker of hope. The thugs had regrouped a few steps away, muttering and casting nervous glances toward the pair. They were skilled in intimidation, but they were not prepared for precision and training honed in the harshest environments. The Navy SEAL's body was taut, ready for instant action. He crouched slightly, shoulders squared, and Titan mirrored him, growl low and menacing. Myra's heart pounded, adrenaline surging, not from fear alone, but from witnessing control she had never imagined. A shadow moved from an upper window, a teenage boy peeking out, watching the unfolding scene. Mira recognized the city's code in his wide eyes, curiosity mixed with caution, hope struggling against fear. The SEAL noticed him as well, nodding briefly, silently signaling that the boy should stay inside. Everything was observed, calculated, and precise. Mira realized she had stumbled into a world she didn't understand, a world where training, instinct, and unspoken commands could rewrite reality in a matter of seconds. The lead thug stepped forward again, a knife in his hand. Titan lunged before the SEAL could fully command, a blur of muscle and teeth. The man fell back with a howl of pain, the knife clattering to the ground. The other three froze, fear replacing bravado. Myra's hands shook as she pulled Lila even closer, but for the first time she didn't feel entirely powerless. The SEAL moved fluidly, directing Titan with subtle hand signals, each motion a silent ballet of danger and control. "Go," he ordered, voice low but commanding. Titan leapt, tackling another thug to the ground. The man screamed, clawing at the dog, but Titan held firm. Mira felt tears sting her eyes, not from pain, but from awe at the bravery and precision she was witnessing. She whispered to Lila, "See, baby? Courage comes in many forms." Lila's eyes were wide, absorbing every detail, storing the memory of salvation. The remaining thugs, seeing their comrades overpowered, bolted into the maze of streets behind them. The Navy SEAL did not chase, they never did unnecessarily. Control was the weapon, and the lesson had been delivered. Mira exhaled shakily, realizing she could finally breathe again. But the encounter had left a mark deeper than bruises or fear. She had witnessed power wielded with honor, and the seed of possibility had been planted. Perhaps she could survive, and protect her daughter, after all. The SEAL finally approached Mira and Lila, his movements measured but careful, aware that fear and relief were tightly intertwined. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning them quickly. Mira shook her head, words failing her. Lila clung to her, whispering, "Thank you, sir," and the SEAL gave a faint nod. Titan sat obediently by, alert even in the quiet aftermath. Mira knew this was only the beginning. The thugs might have fled for now, but the world they inhabited was unpredictable and cruel. Someone had arrived to tip the balance, and perhaps, just perhaps, change the course of her life. Night had settled over Caro Bend, and Mira lay awake in the small bedroom she shared with Lila, the girl's gentle breathing a fragile anchor against the storm of memories swirling in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of the Navy SEAL and Titan, the way they had moved as one, the calm authority that had replaced terror with hope in a heartbeat. Myra's body still trembled, but her thoughts were restless. Who is he? Why was he here? And how will I keep Lila safe from the world that hunts us? Far across the city, in a dimly lit safehouse that smelled of leather and rain-soaked concrete, the SEAL sat alone, cleaning his weapons with methodical care. His name was Callan Rourke. Years of missions, deep undercover operations, and countless lives saved had forged him into someone the world rarely saw. His mind, however, carried scars no metal could erase. A partner lost in Afghanistan, missions gone wrong, and the quiet ache of a life defined by risk. Titan rested at his feet, eyes closed, ears twitching at distant sounds. Together they were a silent, lethal unit, trained to arrive at precisely the right moment and change the course of events, unseen and uncelebrated. Callan had been in Caro Bend for weeks, tracking a group of criminals responsible for attacks on vulnerable residents. Mira and Lila were not part of his original target, but fate had placed them in the path of danger. He had anticipated threats, but even he could not predict the exact moment the danger would escalate. And when he had seen the thugs close in, something inside him had pushed him forward, faster than planning or hesitation, a primal instinct to protect the innocent. Back in Myra's apartment, she thought about the day Darius had died. A car accident, they had said. But she remembered the sudden emptiness, the hospital's sterile white walls, and the disbelief in her own reflection. Life after that had been a maze of fear and exhaustion. Bills, Lila's schooling, and the constant unease of wandering eyes in a city that didn't care. Mira had learned to navigate it all with quiet resilience, but the attack had reminded her how vulnerable she still was, and how much she needed allies she hadn't known she would find. She remembered her own father, long gone, who had taught her that courage was often invisible. It was the quiet decision to rise after being knocked down, to continue despite fear. Mira had lived that lesson every day since Darius' death, but tonight, watching Lila sleep, she realized the stakes were higher. Courage was no longer about surviving alone, it was about protecting someone else from a world that could be merciless. Callan, meanwhile, reviewed the details of the thugs' previous raids. Every alleyway, every timing of their attacks, their ruthless patterns, it was a puzzle he had been piecing together for weeks. He did not act for glory, he acted to restore balance, to give the vulnerable a fighting chance. Titan's ears twitched and he shifted closer, sensing his partner's focus. They had been trained to operate silently, strike precisely, and disappear just as quickly. Yet something about Myra's situation had lingered in Callan's mind, a reminder that even the smallest acts could ripple into lives changed forever. Myra's mind returned to the morning's chaos. She pictured Titan's powerful leap, the SEAL's unflinching stance, the fear draining from the thugs' faces. And she realized for the first time in months, that fear did not have to dominate her life. There were protectors in the world, yes, but also, perhaps, a spark of strength inside herself that had been lying dormant. The night stretched on, silent but tense. Mira thought of the days to come, of precautions, strategies, and preparation. She did not know Callan, and he did not yet know the depths of her resilience. But fate had intertwined their paths, and the coming days would test both their courage and the bond between protector, survivor, and child. Somewhere in the city, shadows shifted. The thugs were planning, regrouping, unaware that the storm had already arrived. And soon the next collision would come, where fear would meet training and hope would demand action. The following morning, Caro Bend stirred to life with a haze of dust and distant horns. Mira walked briskly through the streets, Lila holding her hand tightly, basket swinging with groceries. Every shadow felt heavier than usual, every alleyway a potential threat. Myra's nerves were raw, but there was a fire in her chest she hadn't felt before, the quiet determination to protect her daughter no matter the cost. She had survived loss. She would survive fear. And she would not be a victim again. Callan Rourke watched from a distance, hidden behind the facade of a crumbling building. Titan sat beside him, ears twitching, muscles coiled. The SEAL's eyes never left Mira, tracking her movements, analyzing potential danger. The thugs had fled yesterday, but they would return. Caro Bend had a way of drawing the ruthless back to unfinished business. Callan knew their patterns, their arrogance, and their desperation. He had one chance to intervene before chaos erupted again. Every instinct screamed that time was running out. Mira ducked into a narrow side street, hoping to avoid the worst of the morning crowd. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke and dust. Suddenly, movement caught her eye, 3 figures lurking near a doorway, knives partially concealed. Her pulse spiked, muscles tensing. This was no coincidence. Her mind raced, remembering Callan's arrival, Titan's lethal precision, and the courage she had witnessed. But she was alone for now. She had to buy time to survive until help arrived. The lead thug stepped forward, voice dripping with mockery. "Back so soon, widow? We thought we'd teach you a lesson yesterday." Myra's stomach twisted, but she refused to show fear. "You're wasting your time," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "There's nothing here for you." The thug laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. He lunged forward, but Mira had already sidestepped, using a discarded crate to put distance between them. Her heart pounded, but with every movement, every calculated step, she felt herself awakening, an instinctive resilience she had buried beneath grief. Callan and Titan were already in motion. From the shadows, Titan bounded forward with a controlled ferocity, barking, teeth bared. The thug spun in surprise, stumbling back as Callan's precise commands cut through the air. One man went down before he even understood what had hit him, sprawling across the street. Mira froze, holding Lila close, her breath caught between terror and awe. But the moment was fleeting. The remaining thugs regrouped, eyes wild with anger. They had underestimated their target, and now they faced consequences. Callan moved like a shadow, placing himself between Mira and danger, guiding Titan with hand signals. Mira realized with a sudden clarity that survival required both courage and allies. Alone, she had been vulnerable. Together, she could begin to fight back. The confrontation escalated quickly, a blur of motion, growls, and shouts. Myra's heart pounded in rhythm with Titan's barks, adrenaline sharpening every sense. The world had narrowed to immediate danger, and yet, through the chaos, Myra's mind found clarity. She wasn't just running or hiding anymore. She was watching, learning, preparing, absorbing the patterns of fear and control. Finally, the thugs broke, retreating into the maze of streets behind them, muttering threats but recognizing defeat. Mira sank to the curb, trembling, Lila pressing her small body against hers. Callan knelt beside them, Titan's powerful form between them and any unseen threat. "You're safe for now," Callan said, voice low but reassuring. Mira nodded, a mixture of relief and newfound strength flooding through her. The morning sun rose higher, burning away some of the shadow, but Mira knew the storm was far from over. The thugs would return, perhaps with more cunning or violence. But something fundamental had changed. Fear no longer dictated her every step. She had seen power, precision, and courage in action, and she had glimpsed a spark of her own. As they walked home, Myra's hand tightened around Lila's. The city streets were dangerous, unpredictable, but now she felt a shift within herself, a readiness to face whatever came next. The SEAL and his dog were her shield, yes, but the fire inside her had been awakened. And soon she realized they would all confront the storm together. The afternoon sun hung low over Caro Bend, turning the streets into a mosaic of gold and shadow. Mira watched Lila play quietly with a worn rag doll on the porch, every movement measured, cautious. The girl's innocence seemed fragile now, as if the morning's terror had carved a new awareness into her small heart. Myra's mind kept returning to that scene, the knives, the fear, the way Titan had leapt at just the right moment. She realized that bravery was contagious. Seeing someone fight for her had awakened a courage she had long buried. Callan had taken up a position a few blocks away, keeping a silent watch. Titan lay at his side, ears flicking at every sound. A distant shout, the metallic clink of garbage cans, a child's laugh carried on the wind. For Callan the mission had shifted. Protecting Mira and Lila was no longer just a tactical assignment, it was personal. He had seen countless faces in danger, countless victims, but something about Myra's determined eyes and Lila's unguarded innocence had stirred a rare need to shield, to intervene without hesitation. Mira approached Callan cautiously, aware of the weight of the man's presence. She had never spoken to someone like him, someone who exuded authority without arrogance, danger without malice. I don't even know your name, she admitted, voice quiet but steady. Callan glanced up, expression softening. Callan. And this is Titan, he said, gesturing to the dog. Lila's eyes widened in awe as Titan raised his head and gave a soft, approving bark. You saved us, Mira said, a lump in her throat. Callan shrugged almost imperceptibly. You were already brave. I just helped guide the storm away. That evening, as shadows deepened, Mira insisted on preparing their home for the possibility of another attack. She and Callan worked silently together, reinforcing doors, arranging furniture to create safe spaces, and setting up improvised alarms. Titan patrolled alongside them, moving with fluid, controlled precision. Myra's hands trembled at first, but Callan's calm guidance steadied her. Every action she took was a step toward reclaiming control, a quiet defiance against the fear that had gripped her life for so long. Lila watched from the corner, eyes wide but attentive. Mira knelt beside her, brushing the girl's curls from her face. See, baby? Mama's strong. We're learning how to keep ourselves safe, she whispered. Lila nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson in courage. Mira realized that bravery wasn't just about fighting, it was about teaching resilience, about showing the ones you love that fear could be managed, faced, and even conquered. As night settled over the city, Callan took a moment to observe Mira. He saw more than the widow, more than the frightened mother. He saw a woman forged by loss, capable of endurance, resourceful, and alert. He realized that survival wasn't just about muscle or tactics, it was about heart, determination, and intelligence. And Mira had all three. Titan, sensing the intensity of the moment, pressed close to Callan, a silent reminder that danger could strike at any time, and vigilance must remain constant. A faint noise echoed down the alleyway, a scuff, a shadow moving too quickly, too deliberately. Mira stiffened, instinctively stepping behind Callan. Titan's low growl rumbled through the quiet street. The city was alive with threats, and the night had only just begun. The attackers had not vanished. They were watching, waiting, planning their next move. But for the first time, Mira did not feel powerless. She was learning to fight alongside strength, to anticipate danger, and to trust in her own instincts as much as she trusted her unlikely protector. In that quiet, tense moment, a bond had formed, Mira, Lila, Callan, and Titan. They were no longer merely survivor and savior. They were a team, a unit forged in urgency and necessity. The storm was coming heavier than ever, but for the first time Mira felt that together they might endure it, and emerge stronger. The quiet night of Caro Bend shattered with a sudden crash. Myra's ears caught the metallic scrape of a broken trash can, the hurried shuffle of footsteps against the cracked pavement. Shadows moved with purpose. 3 men, eyes sharp, knives glinting in the dim streetlights. Mira froze, clutching Lila close, heart hammering. This was no longer a test of patience or courage, it was the moment they had prepared for. Callan had anticipated their return. From the corner of the street, he observed the attackers approach, calculating distance, timing, and angles. Titan growled, tail stiff, muscles coiled like springs. Callan whispered commands, barely audible over the tension, and the dog obeyed instantly, slipping into the shadows with fluid precision. Myra's pulse raced, but she steadied herself, remembering the lessons of the day: focus, positioning, readiness. The lead thug lunged, thinking he could catch them off guard. Titan erupted from the shadows, a blur of teeth and muscle, colliding with the attacker and sending him sprawling into a heap on the pavement. Mira flinched, but Lila held fast, eyes wide as she watched the display of controlled force. Callan moved like a phantom, striking with precision, disarming the second man and forcing him backward against the wall. The third thug hesitated, realizing the odds had shifted dramatically in favor of their target. Myra's instincts kicked in. She grabbed a metal pipe from the ground, a fragment of a discarded street sign, and stood beside Lila ready to defend her daughter. Fear had not vanished, but it had sharpened into clarity. Each movement counted. She could not falter. The moment demanded courage, decisiveness, and the knowledge that survival relied on both wit and nerve. The fight escalated rapidly. Titan lunged again, jaws snapping, while Callan intercepted the second thug with a controlled, precise strike. Sparks of fear and adrenaline collided in the night air. Mira swung the pipe, connecting with a thug's arm, forcing him back. Her mind was razor-sharp, body moving in rhythm with the chaos. She realized something profound. Courage wasn't about being unafraid, it was about acting despite fear. The thugs regrouped for one last desperate charge, but Callan's eyes were everywhere, Titan perfectly attuned to his partner's commands. In a flash, the attackers were subdued, their knives clattering uselessly to the ground. Mira dropped the pipe, trembling, Lila pressing herself against her chest, both of them breathing hard. The adrenaline slowly ebbed, replaced by relief, and the dawning awareness that they had survived the first wave of the storm. Callan approached, calm and deliberate, scanning the streets for any lingering threat. Titan padded beside him, muscles still tense, ears flicking for movement. Mira looked at them both, awe and gratitude mingling in her chest. You saved us," she whispered, voice catching. Callan shook his head slightly. "We saved each other," he corrected. "You fought. You protected her. That counts just as much." Lila, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder, looked at her mother. "Mama, you were brave," she said softly. Myra's lips trembled, but she managed a small smile. For the first time she saw herself reflected in her daughter's eyes, not as a victim but as a fighter, a protector, someone who could rise in the face of terror. The street fell quiet once more, broken only by distant city sounds. Mira realized this battle was just the beginning. The thugs were wounded in pride, not defeated. Their return was inevitable. But something fundamental had shifted. Mira had discovered her own strength, Callan had assessed her resilience, and together with Titan, they formed a force the attackers had not anticipated. Somewhere in the shadows, the night seemed to watch, heavy with anticipation. The storm would not wait. But Mira, Callan, and Titan were ready. And when it returned, they would face it together, not as helpless victims, but as a unit forged in fear, courage, and the unwavering bond between mother, child, protector, and dog. The night was darker than usual, the city streets slick with a recent rain that reflected fractured lights like shattered glass. Myra's senses were heightened, every distant sound amplified. The drip of water, the clatter of a shutter, the soft footsteps echoing against brick walls. She had barricaded the doors as best she could, but a knot of dread coiled in her stomach. The thugs had fled before, but their return was inevitable, and this time she feared they would be smarter, more vicious. Callan watched from the shadows, Titan crouched beside him, their eyes scanning every street, every alleyway. Intelligence and instinct had taught Callan that desperate men were the most dangerous. They would strike with cunning rather than brute force. He noted patterns in their previous attacks, memorized the layout of Myra's neighborhood, and positioned himself to cover the most vulnerable angles. Every move was calculated, silent, precise. Myra's life depended not just on courage but on timing and strategy. Mira paced the small apartment, Lila close at her side. "Mama, are they coming back?" the girl asked, voice trembling. Mira swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing calm into her voice. "We're ready, baby. You just stay close to me." She clutched a heavy kitchen knife, her hands shaking but steadying with each passing second. Every fiber of her being screamed to protect Lila, and for the first time she felt that fear could be a weapon if channeled correctly. Then a noise outside, slow, deliberate, almost casual. The thugs had returned, more organized than before. Mira stiffened, heart pounding. Callan signaled to Titan with a subtle hand movement, and the dog melted into the shadows, invisible yet lethal. Mira felt a surge of gratitude and awe. These two silent protectors were her shield, but she was learning to be part of the defense. The first thug tried the front door. Titan appeared in an instant, growling low and menacing. The man froze, knife raised, but Callan was already there, moving with deadly precision, striking the man to the ground without a sound. Mira grabbed Lila and ducked behind the counter, eyes wide. The other attackers hesitated, unsure of what awaited them inside the apartment. Fear rippled through them. The element of unpredictability had shifted. Then the real chaos began. A second thug tried to flank them from the back window. Mira, adrenaline surging, swung the knife with instinctive force, catching the man's arm. He recoiled, giving Callan the opening he needed. Titan lunged, knocking the thug to the ground with the controlled ferocity of a predator. The room filled with shouts, growls, and the pounding rhythm of combat. Myra's heart raced, but her movements were clear, focused. She realized she wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting to define her life, to reclaim dignity stolen by fear. Lila clung to her, whispering prayers she barely understood, but Mira held her close, whispering courage back. Every moment, every heartbeat was a lesson. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was action despite it. She felt strength coursing through her, a combination of grief, resolve, and the determination to protect her daughter at any cost. Finally, the last thug tried to escape, but Titan intercepted him with lightning speed, holding him down until Callan approached. The fight was over and silence reclaimed the room. Mira sank to the floor, breathing heavily. Lila pressed against her chest. The danger had passed, for now, but the lesson was seared into her soul. She could face terror and emerge stronger. Callan knelt beside them, voice calm but heavy with intensity. You did well. You stayed composed. That's rare. Most people freeze. Mira met his gaze, tears stinging her eyes. I had to. For her, she said, glancing at Lila. Titan rested his head on Callan's knee, alert yet calm. In that moment, the bond between protector, mother, child, and dog had solidified. They were no longer separate, they were a single force ready for whatever came next. Outside, the night seemed quieter now, but the storm of Caro Bend had not ended. The city held its breath, waiting for the next move, the next threat. And Mira, for the first time, felt prepared to meet it head-on. The moon hung low over Caro Bend, casting long shadows that danced across the cracked streets. Myra's apartment was quiet, but the tension was electric. She paced with Lila close, listening for every sound, the faint scuff of a shoe, the whisper of wind against the shutters. Tonight the thugs would return. She could feel it in her bones. This was no longer a test, it was a reckoning. Callan crouched in the alley across the street, Titan beside him, both senses heightened to the max. He had studied the thugs' previous attacks, predicted their approach and chosen the perfect positions. Every move was silent but deliberate. He could see Myra's determination from afar, feel the heartbeat of a mother ready to fight for her child. Titan's growl rolled like distant thunder, a warning echoing through the still night. The first shadow appeared at the end of the street. 3 men, faces hardened with rage, knives glinting under the pale light. They advanced cautiously, expecting weakness. Mira didn't hesitate. She grabbed the heaviest kitchen knife she could find, her hand steady despite the pounding of her heart. Lila held her hand tightly, eyes wide but trusting. Mira whispered, "Stay behind me, baby. Watch and remember courage." Titan lunged first, a blur of muscle and precision, colliding with the lead thug and sending him sprawling. The others hesitated, momentarily shocked by the dog's speed. Callan struck next, disarming one attacker and forcing him backward into the alley wall. The fight erupted in a chaotic ballet of movement, growls, shouts, and pounding hearts. Mira moved with instinctive clarity, swinging the knife when necessary, blocking, retreating, and stepping forward at the perfect moments. Lila gasped but did not cry. She watched her mother fight, a quiet awe building in her young mind. Mira realized she was not just defending herself, she was teaching Lila the ultimate lesson in resilience. Courage was action under fire, and love was the fiercest weapon of all. The thugs, realizing they were being outmatched, regrouped for a desperate final charge. Mira met them head-on, knife raised, muscles coiled. Titan intercepted the first man, teeth flashing. Callan moved with deadly precision, tackling the second attacker before he could strike. Mira pivoted, using her weight and the element of surprise to subdue the third, finally forcing them all to the ground. Shouts echoed, weapons clattered, and in the chaos, fear became their undoing. Finally, silence fell. The thugs lay defeated, gasping, bruised, and disarmed. Mira sank to the ground, Lila pressed against her chest, tears and sweat mingling on her face. Callan knelt beside them, Titan sitting alert but calm. "It's over," Callan said, voice low but steady. "For now. But you, both of you, stood your ground. That counts for everything." Myra's shoulders shook as she hugged Lila tightly. "We did it, we survived," she whispered, voice trembling with relief and triumph. Lila buried her face against her mother, murmuring, "Mama, you're brave." Mira smiled through tears, realizing she had become the protector she had once only dreamed of being. Callan looked at Mira with quiet respect. You were never helpless, he said. You just didn't know it yet. Mira nodded, understanding finally that courage wasn't about waiting for someone else to save you, it was about standing up when it mattered most, no matter the fear. Titan nudged Lila gently, tail wagging slowly. The bond between them, forged in the fire of the night, was unbreakable. The city streets remained silent, the storm having passed, but the lesson remained. Fear could be faced, survival was possible, and love, fierce and protective, was the most powerful force of all. Mira stood, brushing herself off, holding Lila's hand. Together with Callan and Titan, they stepped into the night, ready to face whatever the future might bring. They were no longer victims. They were survivors, warriors in their own right, and the darkness of Caro Bend no longer held the power to define them. The first rays of sunlight broke over Caro Bend, bathing the city in soft gold and warming the cold streets. Mira stood on the porch, Lila beside her, their hands intertwined. The night's terror had passed, leaving bruises and sweat, but also a newfound resilience that shimmered in their eyes. The attackers were gone, arrested later by local authorities thanks to Callan's discreet tracking and evidence left behind, but their shadow no longer haunted Myra's home. Callan sat on the curb a few steps away, Titan lying at his side. Mira watched him quietly, a silent gratitude settling in her chest. This man, a stranger hours ago, had become a protector, a teacher, a guardian. He had risked himself to ensure they survived, yet he had also shown Mira something essential, that courage was a choice, not a gift. She realized that she no longer needed to rely solely on others. She had discovered strength she hadn't known existed. Lila ran to Titan, kneeling beside him with wide, reverent eyes. "You saved us, Titan," she whispered, stroking the dog's head. Titan's tail thumped softly, gentle and reassuring. Mira smiled, her chest full, watching her daughter connect with the loyal protector who had become as much a part of their lives as anyone. It was a bond forged in fear, forged in battle, and unbroken by danger. Callan stood, brushing dirt from his tactical gear, his eyes meeting Myra's. "You did all the hard work," he said quietly. "I just made sure the odds were in your favor. You protected her when it mattered most." Mira nodded, feeling the weight of the night's events and the transformation it had ignited. "I had to," she said simply. "I couldn't. I won't ever let anyone take her or me again." For the first time since Darius had died, Mira felt a true sense of closure. The grief that had weighed on her chest for months still lingered, but it had shifted. It had been tempered by courage, by action, by survival. She had faced terror and she had not faltered. She had taught Lila, even at 6 years old, what it meant to stand firm, to face fear with resolve, and to trust in allies without surrendering your own strength. Callan glanced down the empty street, Titan alert but relaxed. "This neighborhood can be unforgiving," he said, voice low. "But sometimes, it's the people who choose to fight, who refuse to bow, that make it better for everyone." Myra's eyes softened, understanding the truth of his words. She had fought, and now she could rebuild, not just a home but a sense of safety, confidence and empowerment that no one could strip away. Lila tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, can we keep Titan?" Mira laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think Titan belongs to all of us now," she said, heart swelling with warmth. Titan gave a soft woof, nudging Lila gently as if agreeing. Mira knew this was more than a dog. It was a symbol of protection, courage and loyalty, a constant reminder that they were not alone. As the sun climbed higher, Mira felt the weight of fear lift slightly, replaced by something far stronger, hope. She held Lila close, Callan at her side, Titan at their feet. They had endured the night, survived the storm and emerged not just intact but stronger than before. The darkness of Caro Bend no longer had the power to define them. Mira took a deep breath, savoring the morning air, the warmth of sunlight on her skin, the soft rustle of life returning to the streets. "We're safe now," she said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. And for the first time in months she truly believed it. The world could be harsh, dangerous and unpredictable, but with courage, vigilance and the strength of love, they would face whatever came next together. And in that quiet, golden dawn, a widow and her daughter, a Navy SEAL and a loyal K-9 had discovered something eternal. Survival was not enough. Thriving, protecting and loving was the true victory.